today's session. Dr. Eleanor Yule, I'm just reading from your university's website. Dr. Eleanor Yule is an award-winning writer and director and interdisciplinary senior lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University, working across both media and film studies at the Liverpool Screen School. She's written and produced over 30 films, including 30 films, bloody hell, good job, including a UK BAFTA-nominated short, a series of bespoke arts documentaries with ex-Python Michael Palin, and a critically acclaimed feature film, Blinded, which was selected for competition at film festivals around the world. Eleanor Yule.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about creative practice. We've only had one so far from Chris, and I got a lot from that, and that kind of focused on structure very helpfully. And again, I think these sessions are really good to kind of challenge the way that often screenwriting is taught, you know, very much by the kind of how-to manuals. A lot of what I'm going to talk about has been inspired by a couple of things, both my exposure to creative writing techniques outside of screenwriting, but also a sensory ethnography that I used quite heavily for my PhD, which I found to be very useful when writing my own screenplay for my practice-based PhD. So what I wanted to focus on today was location, and how location can inspire, redirect and refresh our screenwriting. So often I can find with the students that they want to be very much dialogue based, and they'll come up with characters and dialogue first, which is an interesting way to do it. But because I believe we're a visual medium and we have a wonderful, unique opportunity to tell visual stories, I often find starting with a location can be really helpful to give us a sense of place, atmosphere, and sort of position us visually before we then allow the characters to come in. So that's what I'm kind of talking about today. Okay, so I've got to do it this way, not on my computer. So just to talk a bit about how location is positioned within screenwriting, it's very much connected to genre, so it can be used as a shorthand to put us into a genre very, very quickly. So, for instance, does anybody want to guess at this genre here? Nobody. Horror, yeah. So I mean, it's like instant, isn't it? It's instant. It's a haunted house. It's a graveyard, an empty room with and what's really, really useful here is that what happens within horror is that the location becomes a character, with a backstory. So it's as if you have another character already. So you know, when we're looking at horror, location is absolutely central in terms of not just creating a visual atmosphere, but actually an actual character with a backstory. Okay, so this, anyone want to guess at this genre from the locations?
Love story.
Yeah, romance.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, romance. So here again, what's interesting is we've got a train station, a bridge with nature, Paris, and the cinema actually is quite a common location for a lot of love stories. You know, people getting together their first date in the cinema. So what's interesting about this is that you know the location here is introducing things like cultural differences, travel, experiencing other cultures, but also the idea of cinema itself and the idea of dreaming of imaginary locations. You know, the way that cinema can actually take us to different locations from a seat within a cinema. Okay, and this is the final genre to guess. So that's Idris Elba in an aeroplane. I couldn't get a wider shot than that, which is interesting. It shows you how difficult it is to film in aeroplanes. Any idea of the genre here?
Thriller?
Yeah, thrillers. Yeah, absolutely. And so again, thriller's really interesting because a lot of the locations are connected socially. You know, they're in police stations, they're in courtrooms, they're, you know, transport, and again, often tackling things like historical situations, historical subject, as we've got in The Third Man here. So again, you've got genre, you know, location will bring on board not just the genre, but it will bring also things like, you know, courtroom etiquette, the interrogation, and the history of the interrogation scene. So we can use it very much as a shorthand to think about it. But it's also really good to get the students to think about, well, what happens if I took a location that isn't usually used in a certain genre? So I do encourage them to do that. So here we've got the classic case of Shaun of the Dead, where all these kind of very British suburban environments, like the local pub and somebody's flat and a kind of boring corner shop kind of scenario, is suddenly full of zombies, and how that can really kind of invigorate and kind of bring a sense of irony to a screenplay, rather than, you know, the tyranny of the kitchen sink. And I don't know how many of you, but how many students set things in student accommodation, in kitchens, in locations where they're just not working hard enough. You know, they work on the characters, they're working on the dialogue, but actually the settings are incredibly often just background, and they're not functioning in the way that they could in the screenplay. Okay, so here's an exercise for you all, because this is creative play. So I want you all to look at these 4 different locations, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come up with characters. So what characters would be in these situations, and why are those characters there? Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think about that, each of these different scenarios.
Just checking, is the aim to match what we think it's implying as a genre, or just be creative and do whatever we want there?
It's whatever comes to your mind. So it's totally blue sky thinking.
Yeah.
So whatever, because it'd be interesting just to see how everybody's responding.
Yeah.
So whatever you would like to do.
Cool.
Couple of minutes left. Okay. Everyone had enough time to get something down? Yeah, great. Okay. Okay. So who would like to start with telling us, let's start with the Radio City and go, we'll start with who would like to start with Radio City and say their idea for that first image? I'll just pick people. You're just like the students. No one's volunteering. Okay, Chris, you can go first because it's all your fault.
Damn you. I got less for this one than from the other ones. I was going to come back to it at the end. I had an idea of a nocturnal facilities repairman type guy who takes care of the is it an actual radio station? It's in Liverpool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a radio station in the sky. It was a rotating restaurant, but apparently the food got cold going up the shaft, so they turned it into the studio. Okay, so that's good. An internal repairman, and he's there for what reason?
He works there, and he's an insomniac, and so he's kind of lone and nocturnal, and living with insomnia. And then I was going to add something to it, but I ran out of time.
Yeah, but that's all. You're only just asked for those two things, so that's okay. That's great. Okay, thank you for that, Ben.
Sorry, are we doing Radio City, or are we moving on to the next one?
Still Radio City, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I got a socialite being interviewed about some type of gossip scandal. A bit vague.
In the radio studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's great. Okay, and Ashish.
Yeah. Okay, I have a lonely young boy who climbs the station to talk to a friend who he thinks has died and lives in outer space now.
Wow, okay, yeah. Okay, so we're going sci-fi there. Very, very cool. Yeah, it is quite sci-fi actually, isn't it? Christy?
I sort of saw it as like a, restaurant sort of thing, as opposed to, that. The parents have arrived to pick up their teenage kids to find that all of the teens at the party have become zombies.
Oh, right. Wow. Okay. Okay, Joanne.
I had it as a radio station, and that there was a chef was being interviewed, and the slot was, because we're headed into Christmas. The slot was all about his favorite Christmas desserts.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. Oh, so look at the richness of, and I like the fact some of you've subverted it, some of you've gone for the location to inform the genre, others have thought deeply about the characters and the atmosphere. So you've all come from a really different place, which is wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to the bothy. Okay, and we'll start with Joanne.
I had it's a cottage in Scotland, and I had that it was a grandfather, and he had a sick lamb inside the cottage that's warming up beside the fire, and he's staying up to look after the lamb and get the lamb through the night.
Lovely. Yeah, great. Christy?
I had a disabled couple who have booked this to spend time together and work on their need for independence.
Lovely. Wow. Yeah, that would really do that. Ashish? Oh, I think you're muted. That's you.
Yeah, I have a, like it's kind of sci-fi again, I guess, but like a young celestial linguist who's sort of living here for a bit, waiting for a solar flare that she intends to read because it holds a vital clue of some sort.
Wow. Okay. Lovely. Ben?
I'm just realizing how many of my answers are really, really on the nose. But anyway, so I've gone with polar bear looking to find food.
Too. Sorry, Ben. Carry on.
A polar bear looking to find food.
Oh, wow. Is that on the nose? I wouldn't have thought that.
I feel like it is compared to some of the answers, but yeah.
Chris?
Well, I'll just read. I'll read you what I've got. I've got a big, self-reliant, gruff, lone hunter/trapper who's angry at the world and has gone here to be alone, and who may be a half troll.
Right. Okay. So that could work with the bear and maybe the couple that have gone there, the disabled couple, and become quite a horrendous cabin in the woods kind of feel. And there could also be the farmer with the lamb could come and save them, and then they could notice some incredible solar flares. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to the kind of coffee setup here, which is, I think it's made from a recycled shipping container. So if we start with Christy this time, what did you have for that?
I had insects running a cafe so they can help the community and become independent of human crumbs.
Ah, yeah, because insects could be the new food anyway, couldn't they? So they're going to have to take control, otherwise they're going to get eaten. Right, great, thank you. Joanne?
To me it sort of looks like a movie set. So it's a shipping container that's been converted, and the set dresser is trying to like meet the requirements of the script and the production designer's requirements and the director's requirements, and she's in the process of setting it up.
Great. Okay, that sounds low budget.
Yeah, low budget.
It would work for a low budget film too. Ashish?
Yes, so this sort of, it felt a bit like an art exhibit to me. So like I have a setup where the artist has been murdered, and her boyfriend is a young barista who is sort of investigating this coffee setup for clues about her death. Yeah.
Brilliant. Chris? Murder mystery there. That is not what I'd expect from that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, nice use of it. I had two different ideas. One is a cynical, green-haired, anti-capitalist young female, and the other is the daughter of an alcoholic single mother who needs to escape and is working here to earn money to get away from her family. And I put in brackets, in Bangkok, ?
They could both end up there together. That'd be interesting. Ben?
To me, this looked like it had been deployed somewhere. So I know it doesn't look like it's on Mars, but it felt like something that had been deployed on Mars, and that there'd be someone there for some kind of job interview there on Mars as a kind of place to meet up. So it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it looks kind of totally kind of out of place, doesn't it? Yeah. And actually, did anyone notice that coffee is spelt wrong? Unless it's COFEE.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the mobile poodle parlor. I mean, which is maybe not so much open to, but it'd be interesting to see who you think is in here. I'll start with Ashish for this one.
Yeah, like this is the happier one, I guess. Where like a pet therapist has been kicked out of their apartment, so they move in here and kind of decide to set up their home here along with their work.
Right, pet therapist. I like that. I've never had one of those, but an interesting job to explore. Ben, yes. What have you got for this?
So I wasn't sure exactly what the business of the business of the van was, but yeah, I kind of thought about maybe a dog kind of following / chasing this van around a town, kind of looking for a well-groomed partner, thinking that there'll be dogs inside the van, even though I'm assuming there's no dogs inside the van. But yeah,
that could be a Disney winner.
Yeah,
Chris.
Christy, yeah, so a immigrant aeronautical engineer has to take on this job of cleaning doggies in this new country.
Right, wow. I wonder, is there a similarity between a dog and a rocket? That's maybe.
Well, I mean, I sort of saw it as like, yeah, sort of making, they're going through that journey of valuing the connections and the creatures that we have here.
Right. Okay. Lovely. Joanne.
I had it's a doggy daycare transport, and I've got a vet, like a female vet in her 50s, and she's opened a doggy daycare center, and she's going around picking up the dogs for the morning pickup.
Brilliant. Thank you. Chris?
I had a con woman with a mysterious past that she never talks about, who is driving the van, and she falls in love with a straight-laced policeman.
Brilliant. A straight-laced policeman. So a bit like Clute in a van.
But yeah, that's the sales pitch. Clute in a van.
Great. Has everybody gone? Yeah, everyone's gone for this one, haven't they? Because I did it in a different order. So yeah, okay. So you can see there that there's just a wealth of really interesting characters that maybe we wouldn't normally think about there. And also I really like some of the sort of world building that you're doing around the locations, which is really great. And not all necessarily naturalistic, but naturalistic is working as well. But we've got kind of science fiction, surrealism. We had murder mystery there. So that, I think that's really helpful and playful to get us thinking about character actually from coming out of location. And actually, even if the character's good, we don't necessarily need the location. You may go, well, we're only going to see that van once or twice, because actually it's about who the person's picking the dogs up from. That's where the story is. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to set it here, but it's a way of kind of prompting and inspiring character as well. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. Welcome, Clarissa. We're just doing a few exercises here, creative exercises using locations as an inspiration. So the focus of this is locations and how locations can help within our writing, our screenwriting. So yeah, so sensory ethnography. Another thing is that is getting the students away from their laptops and the virtual world back into the real world. A lot of us have lost contact with the real world. We all were reintroduced to it during COVID. A lot of people started to go for walks. We heard of that, and it was interesting as if nobody knew what it was to go for a walk, you know, as if people had rediscovered nature. So I think it's very true. A lot of my students is they want to do everything virtually. They want to find locations online, and there's nothing like actually getting up and going and physically moving through a space and physically exploring something. So I used this technique of sensory ethnography as a methodology, which I found really helpful. And the two major references here were Stoller and Pink. I've put those up there. And the first one is Stoller saying, you know, that we have within the academy really severed this, you know, the intellect dominates over the body, and that it's time that we need to start, you know, reconnecting with our physical, our embodied experience again. And you know, this to me is central to really good screenwriting, is actually physically being able to, you know, go and do research, to be observing the world. So Pink says that that it's informed by theories of knowing, movement, and empathy. And walking can be a multi-sensory everyday life practice that may be shared with others to enable researchers to understand practices, perspective, experiences, and places. And if we don't kind of move out our comfort zone and we don't go to these places and physically, you know, feel what it's like to be in them, then we're going to write from a very narrow perspective. So I think this is really to be encouraged in young writers, is, you know, that pavement pounding can never be underestimated. So if we look at these different categories, so it's rather than it's just wandering around in a kind of derive, which I know it has a place itself. What I was doing was a little bit more structured. So I saw it as field work to write the screenplay that I wrote for my PhD, which was based in medieval France. So a lot of what I was doing was recreating the journeys and the experiences of my characters in places that actually universally hadn't really changed since then. So there were places of nature. And so these are the kind of 4 criteria I was using. So sensory knowing, so being very aware of what's happening in all of my senses, you know, not just in terms of my intellect, but what are the smells, what am I seeing, what does it feel like? And movement and spatial awareness, being very, you know, moving through a space and what it's like to move through a space. Because when we recreate scenes, when we actually physically write scenes, we have to be very aware geographically of what those spaces are as screenwriters, what they look like, you know, where they are, what they're moving through, how things are connected to other things. So that develops our sense of awareness as screenwriters, because we do have to think in 3 dimensions, you know, in that way. And then empathy, walking in the shoes of characters. So being able to kind of think of what a character may experience. I mean, I was thinking the other day that I've been looking into these time slips that are going on in Bold Street in Liverpool. There's been quite a lot of publicity recently about that people in Liverpool go down a certain street, and there's been numerous accounts of how they have reported going back in time, anywhere from Victorian period to the 1950s. And so I've been doing quite a lot. I'm working on a screenplay at the moment where there is a time slip, and so I've been doing a lot of walking down that street and imagining how somebody would experience a time slip. Would they see faces first, or would they notice the shops and what's in the shops? Would they go into the shops? You know, how would you sort of incrementally realize that you were in a different time and a different space? So that's been helpful. And then reflective thought. So it's really important to be recording this stuff. So audio recordings, photograph, memorabilia, collecting talismans, which I think came up at one of the SRN, you know, the idea of having an object or something that's found in a place that when we are back at the the screen writing, we can touch it, we can feel it, we can smell it. So here you can see I collected postcards, a rose. I also had a little speaker that was replaying things. Sorry, that's my mother phoning there. I don't know, she never phones in the day, but of course she's chosen now. Yeah, so basically, also the audio recording. So things like the birds, the sounds, the available sounds and everything such as that. So, and I think what we do see a lot of this in is poetry. A lot of poets use these techniques, and I think that often if it's not physically possible for the students to go out and do this kind of thing because of time limits and the fact that we're teaching in classrooms, what we can do is use poets to inspire us, because they have almost, if you like, done a lot of this work for us. So here I have a poem that kind of demonstrates the way in which all of these different sensual experiences of location have been kind of collected together into a kind of narrative space. So this is The World Has Need of You by Ellen Bass. And Chris, if you don't mind, because people are probably getting fed up with my voice, it'd be lovely if you could read it for us.
Certainly. I can hardly imagine it as I walk to the lighthouse, feeling the ancient prayer of my arms swinging in counterpoint to my feet. Here I am, suspended between the sidewalk and twilight, the sky dimming so fast it seems alive. What if you felt the invisible tug between you and everything? A boy on a bicycle rides by, his white shirt open, flaring behind him like wings. It's a hard time to be human. We know too much and too little. Does the breeze need us? The cliffs? The gulls? If you've managed to do one good thing, the ocean doesn't care. But when Newton's apple fell toward the earth ever so slightly fell toward the apple. Oh, you're muted, Eleanor.
Yeah, I just worked it out.
I was
yes.
I was doing my poet voice in case anyone couldn't tell.
Yeah, it was lovely. And what we'll do is we'll just read it once more, just because I'm going to ask you to use this as a stimulus. So actually, Christy, would you read it? I think it is an Australian poet, is it not? But anyway, if you would read it one more time.
Okay. I can hardly imagine it. Excuse me. I can hardly imagine it as I walk to the lighthouse, feeling the ancient prayer of my arms swinging in counterpoint to my feet. Here I am, suspended between the sidewalk and twilight, the sky dimming so fast it seems alive. What if you felt the invisible tug between you and everything? A boy on a bicycle rides by, his white shirt open, flaring behind him like wings. It's a hard time to be human. We know too much and too little. Does the breeze need us? The cliffs? The gulls? If you've managed to do one good thing, the ocean doesn't care. But when Newton's apple fell towards the earth ever so slightly fell toward the apple.
Oh, lovely. Thank you both. Beautiful readings and quite different, actually. Okay, so this is another exercise for everybody. So, who is the narrator? I want you to think, again, this is blue sky thing. This isn't a quiz. This is you being creative. So there's no right or wrong answer for this. So who do you think this person is that is walking to the lighthouse? Who is the boy? Why are they there? And who is the narrator addressing? Is there who is the narrator speaking to, and what will happen next? Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to have a think about that. And so please don't do it too attached to the poem. The poem's just a stimulus. So what did you get from that? And you can interpret it and move away from the poem in any way that you want. Don't feel constrained by it.
Can we see the poem again?
If you press the grid at the bottom, you can select your slides whenever you want.
Oh,
So we can, yeah, we can like we can go to the slides. So if you press the grid thing, you can like choose what slide you want to go to.
oh yes.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Can you see the grid thing? Yeah. Okay, one more minute. Okay, not easy to do at 9 o'clock at night, I don't think. I'm glad I'm doing this at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, okay, so let's start with a bit of feedback. So Ashish, can we start with you?
Sure. The poem was really beautiful. I think it really resonated with me. Like it felt to me that she's like the narrator is an environment activist is what I came up with. And she's sort of, should I answer the questions in order? Like that's better, right?
Yeah, or however you like. It's up to, it's just whatever feedback you want to give. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the narrator is an environmental activist. The boy, he's sort of the keeper of the keys of this lighthouse. While the boy is here to sort of let her in, she's here to recover from a burnout. Like the poem really suggested a lot of angst to me. So I think like emotionally it was a very beautiful landscape. Then who is the narrator is sort of addressing herself. So it feels like a conversation that she's having internally while she's here. And what will happen next is that a friendship blossoms between the woman and the boy. She sort of helps him find love. He helps her regain her strength and her sort of self-worth. She leaves the lighthouse with greater confidence and a better sense of her place and her significance in the world.
Oh, that's a lovely, that could be a nice Christmas film. Thank you. That's very heartwarming. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Joanne, how did you get on?
My character is she's a single mum in her 30s, and she's on holidays at the beach with her son. But her son has gone to a friend's place for dinner and a sleepover. So she's walking on the beach by herself, and she sees it's a random boy who rides past, and he's happy, and he's got the wind in his hair, and it's blowing his shirt, and it just reminds her of her son, and she misses him. All of a sudden she misses him because she was actually sort of really looking forward to to having the evening to herself, but then all of a sudden she's sort of reminded that she's missing him. So what she'll do is that she'll go for a walk to the lighthouse, and then she'll turn back and she'll go back to the rented accommodation, and she'll cook dinner for herself. So she's sort of just at a little bit of a loss because it's just her for dinner that night. And I think, yeah, and I think that was sort of pretty much it.
Lovely, and lovely. So that's like a short film idea, isn't it? Whereas Ashish is more of a feature kind of length. So that's really interesting. There's like a lovely little snapshot there from Joanne of just two characters and a kind of feeling of loneliness. Yeah, lovely. Okay, Christy.
Mine was less, more just small, small sort of moments in that. But It's an adult man who's there with his partner, not walking with his partner currently, but on holiday with his partner, but he's walking alone in this coastal town. And so the boy is a stranger who works at the local cinema, and he's on his way. So he's riding, but he's got his white shirt on, but he's got it open, you know, while he's riding, sort of thing. And then he'll do it up when he gets there. And the narrator is actually addressing his partner because they're back home, and he's basically telling the story of the insight that he came to. And so what happens next is, yeah, basically, you know, they're sitting there, you know, outside with the cicadas, singing, you know, in the evening, and they just sip wine and think about the insight that he came to about the world. Lovely, thank you. I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going down a Death in Venice route there for a moment. Death in Venice at a lighthouse. Yeah, no, yeah, it was more philosophical than that. Thank you very much, Clarissa. Welcome. How did you get on?
Thank you. Yes, do you hear me well? Can you? Okay. Okay. So for me, the narrator is someone who lives by the cliff and walks there every morning to think about her problems. The boy is the son of the lighthouse operator. They go there every morning. She goes there to think about her life, and he goes there because he has to work with his father. The narrator is addressing the memory of her father. And what will happen next is that she will come next morning knowing that someone she loves is not alive anymore.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, very thoughtful. Yeah, about memory and loss. And yeah, so it's interesting how, again, you know, there's something about this environment that it encourages contemplation, doesn't it? And the feelings of the past. Thank you, Clarissa. Ben.
So who is the narrator? It's a teacher in a school teaching students who are about 10 years old. Who is the boy? They're a messenger, and the messenger is running. Why are they there? The messenger is running from the lighthouse located just off the cliffs of Dover to get to alert the authorities that a giant tsunami wave is coming. Who is the narrator addressing? Well, a classroom of students, as I said, in the future, learning about the giant tsunami that changed our civilization as we know it. The year is 2068. Why not? What will happen next? The narrator character, the teacher, is leading the charge on creating a much bigger and more destructive tsunami that is man-made. Nice and uplifting for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a bit of a anti-Christmas film, but yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you're using it as a flashback. Yeah, so you're using that as a flashback in a future story. So again, that's really exciting. The idea of, although the poem's very present tense, doesn't have to be at all. It can be a memory of something. You know, it could be. Yeah, that's great. Okay, Chris.
I came up with a very complete idea that I really like, and it's so nice to get time to do that, which was the whole point of starting these sessions, because I just never get time to do that anymore. It's so nice just to get a few moments with a stimulus and get the creative brain going. So I came up with a man in his 40s who, like Ashish, is an environmental activist. Like Ashish's idea is an environmental activist / investigative journalist. So maybe sort of, yeah, investigative journalist / environmental activist who's been on a years-long quest to bring down someone corrupt, and I've put industrial polluter in brackets perhaps. And the boy that he passes is a local kid who lives in this place, and the main character is not from this place. The main character is living far from home. So seeing this kid who belongs there reminds him that he's been far from home as he's been on this quest to bring down someone or something corrupt, and he's addressing his wife who went missing years ago. That's who he's talking to, and he's there. He's there because I like this idea. It came out of nowhere. He's there because the world, maybe the world, certainly the place that he's in, has been plunged into an eternal twilight. I think this is coming from me and Eleanor talking about Scotland being dark. The place has been plunged into an eternal twilight, so he goes to the lighthouse for the light, to sort of bask in the light. And while he's there, some kind of incident happens, some kind of like violent incident around the lighthouse. I hadn't really worked out what, but maybe something to do with sort of fascist people, fascist forces, you know, walking by and creating some violent disturbance. And then when he gets home, his wife, who had disappeared, is back. But is it her? ... etc. There you go.
Wow. God.
I really like it. I might write it.
Yeah, I think there's been, it's wonderful. I love all the ideas, and there are different scales and different perspectives, and you've used that in a really you've all used it in a completely unique way, apart from obviously the environmental activist. That was interesting, isn't it? And you both said a male environmental activist, is that right?
I had a woman.
You had a woman, that's right, you had a woman, that's okay. So it wasn't the same, but yeah, I think that shows you how. And what's interesting is I got that poem because during COVID I decided to learn to write poetry, because it's the only form of creative writing I never did. And I joined a group of poets in Australia, which and that's where I got that poem from, the group of poets in Australia. So that seems to be a very nice fitting kind of, because we've got an Australian contingent tonight. Anyway, so I think I'm about to run out of time. So there was another exercise here, but this is just something I can give to you as an exercise to do if you want with your students. So one of the things that I often do, again, to get them to think about location, is I say, think of a very significant place in your life, somewhere where you've returned maybe many different times. And therefore, the place has witnessed you going through a change in your life. Yeah. So the place almost as a witness. So what would it look like if the perspective of yourself was coming from the location? What would the location see of you over the years? So I chose the toilets at Paddington Station for my significant place. The reason being that these are all the things that have happened to me in the toilets at Paddington Station. So because I grew up, although my parents are Scottish and they were kind of exiled to London because they were actors, I grew up in Windsor, which is where the Queen lived. And it obviously a massive cultural kind of weirdness for me coming from Glasgow, growing up suddenly in Windsor in Berkshire in the south of England where the Queen lived. And I used to go, Paddington is the main station in London that takes you out of Windsor to other places. So this was always my portal back to going to Scotland. So I always knew I'd be on my way back to Scotland, which I felt was my true culture here. But the kind of things that happened to me here were, it was the first time I went up to London on my own with my friends. I came back from Scotland via this toilet after my first heartbreak and broke down in the toilet and did all my makeup because it was all over the place. I used this toilet when I was pregnant with my first child. I met a friend just outside this toilet that then very shortly afterwards suffered a tragic death. And I'm now going to go through it to return to my elderly mother when she had the funeral of her partner. So if you think about how does the location view your life, what changes would happen to you in that time? How would you represent those kind of vignettes? Basically, there are Oh, no, that's meant to. Yeah. So rites of passage moments. So I get the students to focus on rites of passage moments, like what big things have happened. So some of them would choose, you know, places that they would go as a child, little kind of dens or hideaways, or maybe their grandparents' home or a shop they would go to. And we've all got somewhere that's a significant place that means something to us. So where rites of passage moment occur. Right, I can't get, why won't it move on to the next one? Yeah, and so I get them to speak in episodes then, you know, what then, how would you represent, what moments would you choose of all the moments that this place has witnessed in you? How would you then make it into a 3-act structure? What would you cherry pick? What moments would you use? If it was a short film, we might use 3 moments that are kind of associationally linked by this place. What would those 3 moments be? Then I say to them, and then out of maybe those 3 moments, is there one moment that would be symbolic of all the events, where you could kind of expand that moment, but it would include maybe a foreshadowing of some of the other things, or a kind of retrospective feeling of the past? And then yeah, and the idea of observing ourselves from the outside in, and then once we've kind of chosen those events, so as I say, starting with all of the moments, coming down to maybe 3 of the moments, and then maybe 1 of the moment, we can then start thinking about, well, could this character be anybody else but ourselves? You know, what would happen if another character had this experience? Or, you know, could I see myself or this person as somebody slightly different? And that to me is kind of taking the raw material of our life, because I think students struggle when it's about themselves to detach from those events and see them structurally. They see them as an emotional way. But I think what's good about using location is that you can see it as a series of events, because the location only sees certain moments, which helps us then edit down and look at what's really happening that's significant, rather than maybe a lot of the other stuff, which is still significant, but is maybe more of a literary use in a literary, whereas we need to turn things into kind of physical action or event or dramatic moments where something actually happens in a screenplay rather than a feeling. So I found this to be a very useful exercise as well. So I'll share that with you. So I think that's us up to time now, Chris. So I hope you've all got something from this. It's just been wonderful for me to have such good students of such high quality. Because usually I woke up with a hangover in my student flat and fell out with my girlfriend. So terribly rewarding for me as a tutor here. So yeah, so back over to you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. That was great. That was a delight. I loved every moment. That's great. I can feel my brain just going like, creativity. You know, which was definitely my aim for doing this. Well, I don't have to rush immediately away. So even though we've spilled over a little bit, if for those people who don't have to rush away, if you have to rush away, feel free to rush away. But for those people who have a little bit of extra time, should we give Eleanor some feedback and like reflect on how we experience the exercises and what we think about them? Yeah. I'll, Great. In the interest of answering my own question and going first, I will go first. I really liked the responding to the poem. When you sort of introduced the exercise, I didn't feel like I was going to get much from it. I kind of felt like, oh, I don't know about this. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because the like imagery, I don't know, it feels a bit more open, you know, and something about the poem, I don't know, maybe it felt a bit closed and limited, but I didn't find that at all, actually, once I got into it. The opposite. I found that it the use of the questions and the poem narrowed the focus in a really useful way, you know, so you have to come up with something that fits this specificity. And then yeah, it led to just very free release of ideas. So yeah, I found that one particularly effective. Who else wants to go?
I'll have a go. I really loved it. So thank you, Eleanor, and thanks, Chris, for organising it. And I think location, I find location really interesting because it does very much, I think, determine, you know, your characters and who they are and what they do and how they live their life. And the script that I'm currently writing for my PhD is set in outback Queensland in a small country town. So it's sort of that idea of location sort of really resonated with me. But I also love the last exercise that you were talking about in terms of, you know, like a particular location, you know, like the toilets at Paddington Station that you visited sort of so many times at different points in your life and how they were really, you know, quite pivotal. I thought that was really interesting, and I was reflecting on, you know, like what have I, you know, visited at different points in my life, and I came up with a cafe when I moved to Canberra. I was walking distance to it, and I don't live in Canberra anymore, but every time I go back to Canberra, I visit it. You know, I take my son, I meet friends, and it's a really interesting idea. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Joanne. Who else wants to give some feedback? Ashish, want to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Thanks a lot, Eleanor. I think I enjoyed both the exercises a lot. I think for me, the thing that was in common in both was it just sort of trying to connect emotions with settings. I know the exercises weren't overtly about that, but it felt to me while I was doing them that I was kind of disentangling from generally in my screenwriting work, everything tends to become very pragmatic, right? You tend to think of locations very logistically. Okay, where can you shoot? What's possible? What's not possible? So this felt very nice and sort of empowering in a sense that okay, certain locations have feelings, and I think I'll go back to the scripts that I'm working on now to be sure that okay, there are some scenes that we can't move out of the places that they're in. So that was nice, and I think also I love what you said about the body and really sort of being more aware of the sensory stimulus that is around us, because for me, actually the past couple of years I've started a lot of art therapy to sort of deal with a very heavy duty writing burnout. So I think that's also been very much a part of my practice. So I think that resonated a lot.
Good job, Ashish. Anyone else? Christy, Ben, Clarissa, want to go? Ben?
I arrived a little late, but it is here in Brazil. It's very early it was 7 in the morning, so I arrived so late. But I'm sorry for that. And I just want to say that the little part that I participated was really good to me, because I thought the ideas that were coming out of the poem were really crazy, and you welcomed them very very tenderly. So thank you for making me feel creative at this time in the morning.
Early morning creativity. Yeah, Ben, do you want to go?
Yeah. No, just to add, I think, yeah. I mean, yeah. The long and the short of it is, I really loved it. I always discuss and talk about the whole importance of, like you kind of said in your introduction, of setting as a character and all that stuff, and how important it is. And you see it every year, don't you? Because I've just marked probably about 50 short films, and some of the most memorable ones are normally the ones with a really interesting setting. As I think about it now, I can still remember one. It was really cool. It was set in a in a kind of defunct circus. So everything was kind of broken, and just the imagination that had gone into that kind of setting and was just something that kind of set it apart in many ways, even though it wasn't the best story. But there's just something kind of very kind of important about the setting. So yeah, the way that you kind of introduced that kind of gave me a load of really interesting stuff to think about. And I love the whole idea of having a poem as a writing cue or a writing stimulus, or however you phrase it. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess the big question is kind of how shamelessly are we allowed to steal this stuff?
Completely shamelessly.
Being a, yeah.
Well, it's
right.
other stuff, but that's
Yeah,
my thinking is that we can share exercises and then just rip each other off shamelessly. That's my thinking.
Yeah,
We-
well, I'm stealing all of Chris's stuff from the first week, so
Steal away.
Yeah, no, that'd be
But
great.
isn't
Yeah,
the idea that we cite each other and say this is an exercise by a colleague?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, of course, you can choose. The other thing is just to encourage you to use poetry or to use your own ideas of location, as you say. You know, so I mean, I imagine that you'll be able to make it more bespoke to what you want. I mean, that was the idea of those things, is that you could choose to do them however you could choose so those quirky kind of different locations. I mean, what I was trying to do with that first exercise was to show things like a van could be a location, or a country, or a room, like, again, to remind us that location doesn't have to be a kitchen. It could be a form of transport, it could be a public institute, so you can use that idea, I think, to work with students at whatever level they're at, where you want to kind of nudge them a bit and just remind them about the significance of it, so it should be fairly flexible for you. But of course you can use those as well.
Could I also ask you, Eleanor, you mentioned that you did a practice-based PhD.
Yeah.
Would you mind just kind of giving a quick like summation about what it was and what you did? I asked because I'm putting together a proposal for a practice-based PhD as well in screenwriting, so it would just be interesting if you wouldn't mind. Could I ask about that?
I mean, you can get it on Ethos. If you put my name in, the British Library has it, so you can have a look at it. But basically what it was I was creating a medieval screenplay that was kind of had fidelity to the period rather than was a medievalism. So rather than so I had to prove that basically most screenplays written in the medieval period were medievalisms. And then I had to come up with a methodology that said that how I would write the screenplay would be completely different from the way that they'd been written before. So that's where the sensory ethnography came in, and I used kind of feminist art practice as well. And so the way that the screenplay was sort of ultimately produced was, I called it sensory fromage, which was basically weaving sensory material that I'd gained on the field trips with texts and information about the age into a kind of collective collage where there wasn't a central narrator, but the narrator was collective, because that's in the way that medieval society would have been represented, is through a collective conscience rather than individuality. So I was trying to change perspective. So if you like, so what I did was, as I say, it was like, how did I gather my materials together to create the screenplay became the thesis, and the screenplay was the screenplay itself that I'd created. So I had to kind of, the way I did it was I had to come up with obviously what I wanted to do. Then I had to go out and do quite a lot of, on the ground research. So things like, those recordings that I spoke about, and kind of my experiences and where I went, and, like the mountains I climbed and the things I did were all part of, were part of my materials, but they were also cited in the thesis as well. But you'll see how that worked. But I think it's that thing of saying, this is what I want to do. I have to prove that no one's done it in the same way that I have done it before. So it's new knowledge. This is how I'm going to do that. And here it is. It's really the basic thing. So I think so the thesis is the argument about how what I did is new knowledge, what I mean. So that's how, so the thing about the thesis is a reflection on why you did it and how you did it and the way you did it, and then whether it worked or not. It's not and although included in that is a kind of literature review of medieval film and screenwriting, it's the practice that you really need to talk about, because I know people that did a practice-based PhD over in the UK. I don't know what it's like in Australia. I think Australians quite advanced actually in this, because I think they were one of the first to do it. But you know, I know that in the past what's happened is that people have written their screenplay and then gone off and written a thesis about the subject of their screenplay, but not reflected on their process, and failed, because it's the oscillation between theory and practice is the key thing. You know, that you can show that what you have, the theories that you have embraced have helped to create the screenplay, that they're not two separate things. And I know, because I examined Chris's PhD, do you remember that was
Yes,
did you want to talk about how you didn't quite get that until the end? You know, about how much you need to reflect on the actual process.
Yeah. So Eleanor examined my project, and she was a wonderful examiner. And my project was looking, which is also on Ethos if you want to look at it. It was looking at unconventional narrative structures in the screenplay. So I ended up doing a very, very long, almost a full-length thesis. It was about a 70,000 word thesis in the end, and a feature-length screenplay, which was just terrible planning on my part. But the thesis was sort of a survey of all the unconventional alternatives to conventional linear 3-act single protagonist storytelling. So I had to sort of define what the conventions are first. So that was quite a big chunk of my thesis. And then I had to survey as many alternatives as I could find, like passive protagonists, and films like Psycho and No Country for Old Men, where the protagonist dies long before the dramatic climax, and puzzle plot films like Memento with complex non-linear structures, and 1-act films and 2-act films, and anything that broke the conventions. I was just surveying to find out what is the full range of options that are actually available to the screenwriter. And I focused the study by looking just at the crime genre, sort of broadly defined, often quite art house examples of the crime genre, otherwise it would have been too big. And then the screenplay that I wrote was I took one of those unconventional models, and the model that I took was a non-linear modular structure influenced by Memento and Following, Chris Nolan's first film, and We Need to Talk About Kevin, the Lynn Ramsey film. That was probably the main influence on it. And I demonstrated a version of that using the model that I had identified. But I had quite a short reflection. I had like a 5,000 word reflection on the screenplay that I had produced. And the main thing that I had to do in the revisions that I got from Eleanor and the other examiner was to broaden that out to, I think it was about a 12,000 word reflection in the end, and give a much more complete and in-depth analysis of the processes that I used in the screenplay and the methodology that then creates for other screenwriters to use. So yeah, that scholarly academic reflection on the techniques that underpin your practice and why that's significant is key.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for, thanks so much both for explaining. I think last week, Ethos has been down for a while. Have you heard about this? So I was looking last week and I couldn't find them, but if not, maybe I'll email you both if that's okay.
I might even send you
anyway, actually, just for asking more about that. But yeah, thanks so much for explaining. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Christy, we didn't get to your feedback. Do you want to give some feedback?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. And just, I enjoyed basically, like Ashish, you know, the images where I was thinking about how the characters would feel in that space, and then that then for me inspired, okay, well, what characters, what situation do I need, you know, to play with that feeling, that that the scene evokes for me. So yeah, I enjoyed that angle and the variety, and of course the poem, and playing, you know, with, I mean, poems play with time and space, you know, in really interesting ways. And so, you know, that's one of the cool things, is that you can, you know, like Chris did, you can then go off into different directions, which is great. I do have a suggestion regarding accessibility, if that's of interest. Yep. Yeah, cool. It's just because I've got some blind filmmakers on my team, and I try and create works that are accessible for multiple modes. And yes, it's a visual medium, but it's actually an audio-visual medium. And location can be evoked in beautiful ways with sound, you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so this just opening up that possibility of basically, yeah, you know, what are the sounds of a location, and playing with that as a prompt, as a way of having different modes, and not just relying on one mode. Yeah, there's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean that could be really effective for non-visually impaired writers as well, I think.
Oh yeah, it's the same with all accessibility stuff. It's just another thing that opens up. What were you going to say, Eleanor? Yeah.
No, I just think it's such a great idea, especially since what I'm talking about is using our senses, you know, because methodology is about all of the senses. So I think it would be really nice to have the poem and then have the soundtrack. I mean, you could have a poem, couldn't you? And then you could have quite a different soundtrack as stimuluses, and play with that. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a really great idea. I mean, because I kind of came up with this from scratch, because basically it was a lot of different ideas I had. So I mean, it was very useful for me to have to do this, and I encourage anyone else to think about it, because although location has played a part in my pedagogy, this made me focus on it a lot more, and then pull it together and see a strand through it. Because you know what it's like, you know, what we're doing is we're servicing modules and going, oh, well, I'll put this here. You never really get a chance to kind of indulge in a particular thread, which was really, really helpful. And interestingly, Christy, I do have another module where I do play sound for them and talk about, you know, what's happening here. But that's a totally different module. But again, that's really helpful to me to think, no, that can come over here, you know, because I think that we definitely, the way that the teaching works, it's so compartmentalized, isn't it? And you know, the curriculum often dictates how you break things down, and there's absolutely no reason not to kind of amalgamate, pull things together in a way that does enrich it. I mean, the sound thing's absolutely the right thing to do if you're doing sensory ethnography, because that's what I'm saying, is get them out as well. And get them, you know, touching and thinking, and so any of those extra sensory things you could add totally to a location, you know, themed thing.
Yeah, and then with that, you're also playing with, you know, by association, like, you know, people's creativity comes with lots of different things coming together. So then that'll be sparking new ideas, and you're sort of, you know, creating options where people who have different sensory preferences are able to access the work. You know, it's basically, if you're not that visually oriented, or if you're low vision, or you don't even have your glasses with you that day, right? You can still participate in the exercise.
One of the best screenplays I ever got was from a blind screenwriting student, and the story was that, you know, do you know, it's a very famous painting by Salvador Dali, and it hangs in Glasgow in the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery, and it's an image of Christ, but it's looking down on from the above. So it's as if you're hovering above the cross, looking down his body. It's very, very famous, kind of much loved picture. And in this screenplay that he wrote, because it was about a blind protagonist, if he knew if he would steal this picture, he would get to see again. So the whole of the film is about him breaking in to the art gallery, and the reason he wants to see is he's got a new girlfriend and he needs to see what she looks like. So there's this absolute unbelievably surreal scene where he's trying to have sex with her with the painting strapped on his back. And that to me it's just like I've never read anything like it, and I still haven't. And but it was meant to be you know, very, very funny, but it was written by somebody who was in the class that was blind. So, you know, about this desire, you know, and obviously that's also about feeling left out as well, because if the image, you know, wanting to see you know, those images and finding it quite difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, some people just they're fine with not seeing, you know, they prefer the oral, or they, you know, prefer the tactile and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or-
he lost his sight, so I think that was
I
part.
thought-
You know.
Yeah, because someone who's blind from birth would be like, I don't care. You know, a lot of the folks that I, you know, speak with, they're like, I don't care what things look like. You know.
Yeah. Great.
Cool.
Well, shall we wrap it up there then? Yeah. Call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Eleanor. Lovely session. Really enjoyed it, and nice to get to chat with you all. Merry Christmas, everybody. The next session, I haven't set a time yet, but Rex Urbano is penciled in to lead the session. So I'll set it up with him and we'll try to do it sometime in January. And apologies to Joanne and Christy, that will be at the LA friendly time. And probably apologies to Ashish as well. I think that will probably be quite late in Mumbai. It'll be 6 p.m, I think, probably UK time. And but we'll record that. So you can review it later. And Clarissa, thank you for waking up and for joining the session. All right, thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you when I see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Evan. Bye.
See you.